All right, everybody, welcome back. We are moving on to Module 8, which will be the last module before our section exam, which will be on Wednesday. So I hope that you all are taking a look at that study guide and are asking any questions that you might have before the exam. So today in our lecture, we're moving on from characterizing different forms of life, and we're starting to link together the concepts that we covered in our first section to the concepts that we started to develop in this section. So now what we're going to be looking at is specifically animal behavior. So we're going to be looking at the kingdom Animalia and specifically mostly chordates. And we're going to be linking um, animal behavior to evolutionary biology and how those two intermingle to create the adaptations that we see today in animals. So I thought that I would start off with a study that is, again, linking some of the concepts that we talked about previously to what we're going to be talking about today, and that's looking at the fossil record of bird behavior. Um, so this is an interesting study that's saying, what can we learn about the behavior of extinct animals? Um, and in this case, looking specifically at birds. So here we have actually fossilized nests of an extinct type of bird. And what we're able to do is we're able to understand, based on where these fossilized nests were located, we're able to ascertain that the nesting grounds of this particular bird likely look something like this. So again, inferring interesting behavior from fossilized records. Another way that biologists can sort of start to think about behavior in the fossil record, again, is looking at just the physiology of the animals. So here we have several different skeletons of extinct bird species. And from these, we can see that the beaks are very different. And we can start to infer some specialized behavioral traits that we might expect from these birds given the shape of their beaks. So these are the types of questions that paleozoologists start to think about and linking the fossil record to animal behavior. So the driving questions that we're going to be looking at for this module are, first, how do we define behavior? And what are some important elements that are typically studied? Second, we're going to be looking at what are the attributes that really frame animal behavior experiments. And we're going to understand how biologists look and understand animal behavior within these four attributes. And then lastly, we're really going to spend a lot of time understanding how evolution and behavior are related. So let's first sort of start to tackle that first question. What is behavior? And initially, when you sort of envision what animal behavior is, you're likely thinking about animal movement. You're thinking about potentially a mating display from a bird of paradise. So very, very clear movement and exaggerated movement um, occurring there. Or you might think of the viral video that was out this last week of a cougar protecting her cubs. And then lastly, you might think of more complex behavior where you're actually, like, for example, dogs learning how to detect COVID-19 in airports. So while these are all forms of movement, behavioral ecologists tend to think of behavior a little bit more broadly. In reality, behavior encompasses social interactions. So thinking about grooming, thinking about how one individual relates to another individual, cognition. So basically, how an animal is able to think. So really, when we're referring to cognition, we're really thinking about thought and understanding. And I included a video that I'd like you guys to watch. If you want to pause this lecture and go ahead and watch that, you can. Um, of cockatoos actually creating a tool in order to get a treat out of this complicated box. So here you have evidence that the bird not only understands the challenge or the problem at hand, it's able to create a tool in order to process that problem. And lastly, related to cognition is learning, the ability of an animal to understand and adapt based on external pressures. And here I included a cat learning to ring a bell, which is a terrible idea, but demonstrates the process quite vividly. So within behavior, it's important to think of behavior is providing an animal with flexibility and the tools for ecological choice. So its ability to influence its interactions with the environment. And it's important to note that, again, and this is where we're going to start thinking about how behavior relates to evolution, the richness and diversity of the tree of life and is provides a multiple provides for a lot of different options for different diversity of behaviors. So where there's diversity of animals, there's going to be diversity of behaviors. And that's where we're going to sort of pick up in the next lecture. So we're going to be thinking about, so we know that these species diversity is going to lead to diversity of behaviors, but how do those two interact? And how ultimately is behavior related to evolution? Okay, we'll pick up in part 2.